Welcome to the AGvisorPOD.
Hi, this is Rob Saik, and I'd like to welcome you again to the AGvisorPOD series. We're bringing you some of the technological advancements and connecting it to the leaders in the industry, such as indoor farming. This is going to be a wonderful learning experience for anybody who's interested in indoor farming or greenhouses or controlled environmental agriculture. Let's get started. We have three guests with us today. Dr. Mirza is from Edmonton. He's been a pioneer in indoor farming, graduated a long time ago from the University of Alberta, worked with the Brooks Research Station down in southern Alberta, played a big role in hydroponics, 20 years in vertical farming, is now retired and is serving as a consultant and as a coordinator for the Alberta Greenhouse Association, which is about 150 members. Michael Short is from Ontario. He's from Hamilton, but still cheers for the Canucks, where he grew up in British Columbia. He's been involved in the Niagara region for over 25 years in IPM strategies, beneficial insects, and chemistry management on indoors and ornamentals and nursery crops. Done a lot of scouting, still active in the industry, 20 years of biocontrol. And then we have some of the new technology coming on the marketplace with Gavin Schneider. Gavin is VP of Agronomy, grew up in Vulcan, Alberta, in the prairies and the flatlands, but spent time in Southeast Asia on research farm, worked with Bayer Crop Science on plant phenotyping, biological pesticides, and now works with Ecoation, a really exciting company that's doing forecasting and yield and IPM analysis with machines inside of greenhouses and controlled agricultural environment spaces, tomatoes, cucumbers, edge computing. We're going to learn a lot more about that. Common thing with all of these folks, they're all available on AGvisorPRO. And as I think during our preparatory comments, I think it was Michael that said one of the most, greenhouse growers don't get a lot of visitors except for salespeople. Well, here with AGvisorPRO, you can reach any of these people. We're going to start with Dr. Mirza. And the first question is, in your mind, at least according to the experience you have, what is indoor farming, greenhouse farming, vertical farming, controlled agriculture, environmental farming? What is that like to you? What do you think about?
Yeah, but basically defining, I always remember that in old time we used to call it a glass house, and then third wave greenhouse. So controlled environment applied protected cropping, anything which could be a rain shelter in some countries. I have traveled to Caribbean country where just a simple greenhouse was considered a controlled environment. But in a cold climate where we live, of course, and many other countries where the night temperature is too cold, protecting your plants and growing at the proper temperature, proper humidity, proper air movement. So that is what a controlled environment, where you have some control over your inputs and you could grow much better, high yielding crops as well. Because in a cold climate, we cannot have outdoor production to meet our marketing needs. So that's where the controlled environment came in. But that's a relatively new terminology. Previously, we were using greenhouses, then indoor farm came in. So this just is a comprehensive term we are trying to say, which include all the categories which we're going to talk about, greenhouse.
So to be in what you just said there, controlled environmental agriculture encompasses a lot of these other subcategories.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Michael, for you, what is it that you think about when you think about indoor farming? So you're in the Niagara Peninsula. Dr. Mirza is in Edmonton working with prairie and Alberta growers. What is it that's you're seeing in your area that defines controlled or indoor farming?
Well, first of all, I agree with Dr. Mirza, but I come from a different angle because I work with insects and pests and disease. We're effectively trying to, in that end of things, we're trying to reproduce what nature is doing in a tropical monoculture in most cases. So we try to do things that we can duplicate out in nature that's going to help us in the cropping system. So it is It is a bit of a moving target, but over and over again, insects do the same things over and over again. So we're able to set things up to help them or enhance them in what they're trying to do in the crop, and come out with a good outcome for the growers.
When I always learn so much when I do these things. So you just mentioned the word tropical monoculture. I never thought about that. But can you just shed a little bit more light on that?
Well, in Ontario, it can get down to minus 30 outside in the middle of winter, but the sun is still shining. In fact, our best days some of our best days for growing in glass houses, for instance, here is when it's that cold and crisp, but not a cloud in the sky. So we're able to get that very intense sun come in and guard the plants, of course, from that damaging weather outside. We are in effect keeping that at a temperature that is suitable to whatever crop we're growing, regardless of what's happening outside.
I was finding it interesting because monoculture, the word, is being lambasted and vilified in social media, and yet when you think about it, growing inside of a greenhouse, that's exactly what it is. You're growing a single crop. Gavin, over to you now, and you're a prairie boy, but now you're working in the controlled environmental agriculture space. Why? What does it mean to you, and why did you choose this area? What makes it of interest and passionate for you?
For myself, what I see happening in controlled environment agriculture is really just a massive opportunity for people that are interested in food production to be able to harness kind of new technology, new business models, and new ways of operating a sustainable farming company, bringing that completely indoors. Coming from the prairies, and my family still farms kind of broadacre crops, and really kind of seeing some of the challenges that come from being completely reliant on Mother Nature to generate your income year after year. We all know that what happens when you get a severe drought, when you get bad hailstorms. What we have the opportunity to do is to take away some of that risk. And I like to think that when people engage in farming, it's a gamble every year. That it's a calculated gamble, but what we're doing is really removing some of that risk. And moving indoors has the opportunity to produce new crops just about anywhere in the world. And what it allows people to do is to grow year round. And what I think is kind of the best opportunity for young agripreneurs in agriculture right now is the opportunity to merge outdoor agriculture with indoor agriculture. And it's a way that you can potentially bolster kind of your income throughout the season, and where the people that are really kind of making strides into it maybe have a foot in both spheres of producing food. And that's where I think that the opportunities are just massive. And for people that have a eye for kind of managing plant growth, they are able to steer a crop that much more efficiently and able to really kind of achieve just tremendous yields in a controlled environment.
So this is interesting. I hadn't thought about that, having one foot in outdoor and indoor agriculture at the same time. And so we just dealt with what is maybe indoor agriculture, controlled environmental agriculture, but why do you think it's increasing, Dr. Mirza? What is it that you think is bringing more and more of this into the attention of the media lately?
I think the main is after the pandemic, especially what happened that everybody is realizing, both average consumer plus the government plus the administrator, that our food is not a secure place because we import a lot of stuff. So food security brought in a very important aspect when government said, okay, we want to make it as secure as possible. And that's where the protected cropping, greenhouse cropping did get a big boost, in the sense that a lot of expansion has taken place. I've been in Alberta, and I know in Ontario as well, where we realize it has to be locally produced as much as possible. There's no doubt that we will depend on the imports for some time, but I know slowly in Alberta, we are replacing the imports to a significant level. So that's why there's a big interest in indoor farming, vertical farming, you name it, that we want to grow more for locally. And of course, always remember that empty warehouse, real estate always have been one of the primer. My space is sitting empty. My business has gone out, so what should I do? So that's where another incentive came in. But always realize that that alone is not enough to make the sea. And then naturally we've thought a little bit more on that. But that is the primer, the pandemic, the scare that our food is not secure, then for safety issues, for security issues, they all prompted us to look at a fresh look and start expanding in the protected cultivation on indoor agriculture.
That's a really good insight. I mean, the pandemic for sure brought attention to
Absolutely.
Michael, if you pick up on what Dr. Mirza just said, loads and loads of real estate out in Ontario, lots of warehouse space there in Ontario. Is that one of the reasons why people are paying attention, or why do you think people are paying more attention to indoor farming techniques? And then, Gavin, I'm going to switch a little bit over to you after Michael and talk a little bit about the investment community and why they've been attracted to it. Over to you, Michael.
I think it's a number of things, and I'll echo what Dr. Mirza said about food security. I'm that's a bit of a hobby of mine as well. So try to solve some of that. So yeah, you mentioned lots of land. Absolutely, there's lots of flat land. So we have a lot of large, what started out family run. Some are still family run. Large vegetable greenhouses in Leamington area, Kingsville, and they're big corporate structures now. It is I'm not going to say easier, but it's one of the things they can do fairly be flexible on is expanding those acres, and so there's a lot of that going on where they're just adding on another 100 acres or so to their operations, or buying out a neighbor, that sort of thing. And some of it, I think, as in any business, comes down to economies of scale. So input costs and so on are going up, and good segue into that. But they, the way to get around that is economies of scale. So the more tomatoes you can grow in one space, and when you're adding on, of course, you're using all that infrastructure that you already have in place, plus some. And so I think that is happening with the vertical farming. I think, just like Dr. Mirza said, I think the idea of it being able to grow it anywhere in any building is attractive.
Wow. Well, this is, moves right into your world with Ecoation, Gavin, and starting to bridge into the technology play. We're going to talk about some of the pros and cons right away, but from your perspective, what is it that's causing some of the impetus for the increased awareness or increase in attention to indoor farming?
I think part of it comes down to the recognition of the vulnerability of our food supply right now, particularly, in North America or Canada specifically, is, if we see either potential environmental climate shock or a market shock, for some of our food supplies that are coming out of Mexico or Southern California, that can have a big impact on our food prices. And we've seen that, the price of food has risen, quite past the standard rate of inflation that we're seeing right now. And that, there are, a number of kind of factors that are driving that, but some of those are at the farm scale. And so, there has been a tremendous investment into the controlled environment agriculture space. And I'm going to kind of go back and define, my view of that is there's greenhouse horticulture, and then there's indoor farming. And when we look at greenhouses, there's low tech, mid tech, and high tech. And then when we look at the indoor agriculture, there's what we can call plant factories with artificial light. And this is where you might see kind of some of these different layers kind of stacked up. But when over the last couple of years, the investment and the impetus to go into this has largely gone into kind of one of two spheres. And there was really a tremendous amount of hype that went into, let's call it, plant factories with artificial light, and a huge amount of investment, and what we'll get into kind of what's happened into that market a little bit. But a lot of that was based off of over exaggerated yield claims, a underestimation of the current capabilities of some of the technologies that went into these farms. But whereas the other investment that potentially went into kind of the greenhouse space, I would say has paid off a lot better. It's a lot safer bet. There's the standardization of the food production practices are there. But I really think, the investment space is looking at one of the two directions. And when new people are investing into this, they should really take a hard look and an evaluation at specifically, the technology that they're investing in, because just like outdoor agriculture, there are standards of practice that have been proven over the last 30, 40 years that we know work. Whereas some of the companies that are developing completely total controlled environment agriculture, let's say that's completely indoors, a lot of what they're building is not standardized at this point. And we're really trying to achieve that, within the industry is a standardized production method. But a greenhouse in Mexico largely looks quite similar to what a greenhouse in Ontario looks like. And it looks the same in Turkey. It looks the same in China and Japan. And so what we want to be able to do is evaluate the standardization of the technologies so that you have a known yield outcome that comes out of it each time.
So just the thing I'm picking up on this, there's a differentiation between sun and sunless indoor farming and greenhouses. Just outside of where I live, just down the road from Sylvan Lake near Gull Lake is Dolph's greenhouse. And Dr. Mirza, you would know them. They're actually they're in a partnership. They're in a partnership with an energy company because, when you think about what the pros and cons are of indoor farming, one of them is fixed costs. And so you have to be aware of that driver. And so let's move to that. Pros and cons of indoor farming, especially, I guess it doesn't matter. You brought up Mexico, which is hot climate, and they have to likely cool. And in Canada, we have to heat. So Dr. Mirza, some pros and cons to be considered if somebody's listening to this and wondering if they should get involved in indoor farming.
And Robert, you brought a very good example of Doof greenhouses. I have grown up with them when the current owner was just the kids helping in the greenhouse. So they started small and learned everything, and now they are proud owners of 26 acres of high-tech greenhouse peppers. So the main point is, once you decide to go into this business, you've got to know the business of the plant as well, and your business have to make them compatible. Or the input costs are changing so fast. For example, in a protected environment, heating cost is one of the major costs, but labor cost is the number one. Labor is about 34% of your operating cost. Heating costs have raised from about 2-3% to almost 10-15% because we have the cold climate. So you've got to know your labor is a big challenge. Cost and heat. Since I've been working with the greenhouse industry, getting qualified labor who could work in the greenhouse, which is almost a hot climate inside, has been a challenge. And we have to depend on foreign workers as well coming in. So make sure that once you start it, have a good business plan, That's where people like on AGvisorPRO could be very helpful, where you have a diverse base of people, experts who could say, okay, these are your input costs, these are your operating costs, these are your investment costs, what greenhouse structure you need, where are you going to find your labor, what's your cash flow, crop growth. That's one of the toughest part, what crops are going to grow, which have market potential. I know that we have undergone a change when we started working at Brooks, as you met and you pointed it out. We used to grow the regular cucumber, which needed bees for pollination. And then the bees will only work in a glass greenhouse under plastic because these are the honeybees. So then due to hailstorm, we switched from glass to plastic because here every 10 years, they will come and destroy your greenhouses. So then we switched on to plastic. And then the honeybees would not work. So then we have to go, bumblebees came in. So knowledge component of the greenhouses, you've got to know all these aspects that what crop mix to grow, what sort of production I'm going to get, what is the nutrient management. So everything will come in. So it has to be a comprehensive proposal which you've got to work on and where I'm going to market it. See, Alberta, for example, is a smaller market. Ontario is a very large market, and most of the limited production goes to the northern US states, and they have done a great job on that. So having that information is very important. Your cost of production, the crops you're going to grow. So this is where I always advise people that is a good business. You have to go through it, but like any other business, you got to know you're growing plots.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're growing cows or something, you got to know their business.
Yeah, that comes down to, in my mind, it comes down to two things you mentioned. You mentioned the plant and the plants. So the plant being the physical facility.
Right. Exactly.
The second piece being the plants itself.
Absolutely.
So Gavin, if I think about the constraints in indoor farming, like the pros and the cons, we've been talking a little bit about the pros from the standpoint of being able to grow crops not in Yuma, Arizona, and ship out 1,100, 1,500 trucks a day north and east, but being able to grow it closer to the point of consumption. What are some of the trend lines, Gavin, that you see that's actually making this work better now than, say, a decade or 15 years ago?
Mm-hmm. So when we look at what's happening in controlled environment agriculture, there's a drive towards automation and efficiency. And so, probably for, many of the listeners here, they may come from kind of a grain cropping background and where it's possible today with machinery for two people to manage 5,000 acres of crop. That's not the current reality today in the greenhouse industry or in indoor farming as a whole, where you're reliant on a lot of labor. And, as Dr. Mirza said there, 35% of your costs are going into labor. And so one of the things that people have to realize is that as a farmer, you're actually going to be learning kind of more skills around people management. You're managing labor most of the time. And so, but what I can really see here is that there are new technologies that are coming out to address some of these labor shortages or these labor challenges to actually handle the manipulation, the harvest, the pre-processing, the post-processing of the plants. And there are some, really interesting technologies. Let's go into kind of greenhouse lettuce production. You have what is called a deep water culture system that can almost be completely automated in terms of the seeding, the harvesting, and then packaging of the equipment, where you can now run this facility, this plant factory, with relatively few people. But what's a requirement there is that the operator that you have in place really knows how to drive that technology and maintain it and use it well. And that requires, a fairly high level of skill and sophistication around, knowing how these mechanical systems can work together. But currently, if we go into kind of a tomato crop right now, all of the tomatoes that are grown in these large, vast greenhouses, they're all handpicked. Every single tomato that is produced right now is touched by a human hand. And that's what I think maybe a lot of people coming into the industry doesn't realize. We're still quite far behind when it comes to the equipment and the hardware on the plant side. But that is changing. There are a number of companies that are inventing automated harvesters. On the Ecoation side, we're helping people with identifying how much they can harvest, because that's a real challenge. You've got a 150 acre greenhouse. And, there's variability. People think that, one of the cons here is people think that it's perfect across every part of the greenhouse. It's not. You have variability from one part of the greenhouse to the other because the sun naturally moves across in different ways and interacts with different parts of the plants. And so people think that it's you just put the plant in and let it go, and and automation will take care of everything else. But that's really not the reality today. Is there's still a lot of labor that goes into it, and you have to be able to manage that resource, the most important resource, effectively.
So when talking about labor, we're talking about people, we're talking about human resources. And to me, there's two kinds. There's specialized, and then there's more, your rudimentary labor picking tomatoes, for your example. Michael, you and I and Dr. Mirza are more silver hairs. Gavin's kind of a younger guy, so we'll kind of put him in that side of the equation. But you've got so many 25 plus years experience in IPM. So let's define what IPM is and share with the audience a little bit around that knowledge, that wisdom that comes over time, and that, white flies, they're unchanging. I mean, you have to understand the cycle. And so my concern with an industry like this is, where do you find the deep domain expertise to layer on top of the management, to layer on top of the labor? What's your impression of where we're at in the industry with respect to domain expertise, Michael?
Yeah, good question, Rob. First of all, I'm young at heart, so yeah, you're right. I'm sitting on a I've had a lot of I'm blessed a little bit because I've seen the industry evolve as it went along, and I have made sure that I was, kind of in the part of that. So I was able to see it evolve where when I first came into play, I mentioned the term before, growers would spray and pray that their sprays are working, tank mixes and that sort of thing. So when those first visits happened, I was really telling them to continue to do what they're doing, and then I'll watch and see, what tools are working, what aren't working, and then we'll evolve from there. And it was not overnight, for sure. Now I think what we're seeing is we've reached a level, for instance, most of our growers, if not all, are using some sort of biological control, which is a living organism to control pests or disease, and it could include a spray. So there are biopesticides, and how the industry doesn't like that word, but I'll stick with it. And so these are all becoming commonplace now. And when, for instance, I teach at college, and one of my students leaves the course to go work out in the field, it's a new norm for them. So they don't have to go through all that background that I may have and others have over those years. But the advantage of that is I've seen almost everything. There are the odd things that come into Canada that, we haven't seen yet, but I like to keep my finger on the pulse of when that's happening and how to get control of it and that sort of thing. But you see things over and over again. And the new people coming into the field now, even though that's a new normal, they don't have that history background. It's similar to, when I moved out to Ontario, I had a hard time from BC. I had a hard time, it took longer to get friends, for instance, because I didn't have a history with those people. So I wasn't sure, I had to have, a year or something in place to really, trust that person and make friends. The same sort of thing with the IPM. You need that years.
So define IPM, because you haven't yet.
Sure. Yeah. Integrated pest management. It is the use of organisms to reproduce what is naturally happening on a larger scale in a closed environment mostly. It can be used outside as well. But it's also processes, good weed control, good, water management and that sort of thing. So
give us an IPM example of how to utilize beneficial insects in a greenhouse.
So there's 5 or 6 large companies that produce beneficial insects worldwide. There's a lot of smaller feeder ones. But so, just to give you a background, a grower would order insects, and they would receive it by courier about a week later. So the way we work as a company, Ego Habitat works as a company, is we're working 2 to 3 weeks ahead of any economic damage in their crop. So it takes longer for beneficial insects to work. If you had a spray that worked, when it did work back in the past, it would be almost instant when something was locked down. This is more, if you took a graph, it'd look more like this. So you always have the pest in your crop in most cases, so the beneficials have something to feed on. That sort of thing.
This is interesting because we've gone a long time. Even in my career, you use the terminology spray and pray. In other words, it was easier to spray and chemical cocktails. If you were missing it with one, you'd add 3 or 4 more, and maybe do prophylactic treatment. But when it comes to integrated pest management, Dr. Mirza, you've seen this grow in your career. We're gonna talk a little bit about that, and then we're gonna shift from how we do it. Maybe talk a little bit, Dr. Mirza, about how we do integrated pest management. We're going to talk to Gavin about how we potentially can do it going forward using more sophisticated automation tools. So, Dr. Mirza, first of all, integrated pest management from your standpoint, where has it come, and what do you need to know as a seasoned veteran? What is the information you need so you don't have to go all the way out to the greenhouse, but somebody could feed the information to you? How does that all?
Absolutely. I'm glad that Michael has shared some very good point on integrated pest management, because that's a big challenge when you're growing, even outdoor or indoor. Pest will be a big issue because that is the food supply. They will come. I have seen in indoor situation, thrips coming in, whiteflies coming in, and you can't spray indoor at all because you directly consume the product. But in a greenhouse situation, IPM has a great value. And when Michael was talking, I was remembering 1980s when pesticide was being used, and they were not effective. They were not working at all. So we started having workshop for the growers. Okay, here you're going to do biological control. Here you could use some pesticide. So an area, but now we have reached a stage where biological control and IPM is almost 99% of the growers practice them.
Wow.
That's a direct implication for the food supply as well, and for food security as well. So our pesticide use has gone down significantly because some diseases can be controlled with climate control properly, especially the fungal diseases. We don't need to spray that. So Michael has raised a very good point. The importance of IPM in the indoor situation is very high, in my opinion. So going back to how I react to that, so growers will send me a picture, and we have a very good greenhouse chat, for example, during the season. Every other Monday, growers get together on Zoom, and we talk about, every growers give their experience, and we tell them, okay, this is the aphid control, parasite. See, there are 2 types of biological. One is called the parasite, other are predators. So nature is fascinating, Predators will crunch, munch on the insect, will eat them, and parasite will lay their own eggs there. So we will guide them, okay, these are your best options. And many supply companies of biological have done a great job in giving the information. And then the best part is we know if we have to use a spot spraying of pesticide, which of your biological would not be affected that much. And it has become such a good science now that every week we have to release this. This is a protective program. This is an eradicated program. So the importance of IPM is tremendous in an indoor situation because insects will come. You have to protect your plants from there because, and especially the vertical farm, it absolutely, I like to use the more focus on plant health. You could isolate, don't let the insect come in. Once they come in, then what are the options? So this is a great area again where the growers should know. If you try to going into investment in greenhouse indoor, this is a very important part to understand. That is not you build the greenhouse, plant few plants and you're ready to go. No, it will be a total package until you are harvesting. And once you've done the harvesting, then of course there's the rules and regulation of packaging and the gap program. So all those things also have to be known. And then what pesticide did you use, record of that. And then of course the testing is done as well. That's any residue or registered chemicals. So the whole broad area. We could have a webinar totally on IBM and other, we'd love to do.
Might do that. We on AGvisorPRO, for anybody listening, you can download AGvisorPRO and you can join communities. One of the communities we have, Dr. Mirza, is actually a contributor to our horticulture and indoor farming community on AGvisorPRO. And Ecoation is on AGvisorPRO. Gavin, as you think about what you're doing as a company, so let's match the technology that you're employing to inside of greenhouses. Tell us a little bit about Ecoation, what you're doing, and then how would you leverage that with Michael and Dr. Mirza? How do you stretch their brains using the technology that Ecoation is bringing inside for farming?
Yeah, so that's Ecoation's main business, is essentially providing a digital IPM program to growers. And so over the last couple of years, we've deployed our platform in greenhouses around the world. We've partnered with, one of the main bio suppliers, a company called BioBest out of Belgium. I've kind of spent the last year, traveling back and forth to kind of work with our partner there. And so over the last year, or I guess couple of years, our device has been used to scan about 30 million square meters of crop. And so that's about...
Describe your device. I'm picturing somebody like R2D2.
I would say that's not too far off. So what we have is what's called the OGO platform. And so we have what's called the OGO digital platform and the OGO advanced platform. And so essentially what this device is, a location-aware scouting platform. And so in a greenhouse, what we have is a position called the scout. And the scout's role is to go through the greenhouse. Typically, they cover anywhere between 25 to 100% of every row in the greenhouse every week. And their job is to identify and track issues within the greenhouse. And so they're specially trained employees that will then assign what we call a pressure rating score to each area of the greenhouse. And so our device will allow them to do this seamlessly. It's a digital platform where essentially it's a wireless connection. It allows them to record their observation, and then this sends it to a digital web platform. And essentially what we do is
so you still have a person walking through with some sort of a device and they're recording their observations. So it's not quite robot like R2D2.
Yes. So there's a camera that's attached to it, and we use the camera for doing things like counting the fruit, doing other types of plant measurements. So we're looking at doing kind of plant health index scores, stem counts, things like that. But what we're looking at there with the camera is really we create a virtual walk for every single square meter of the greenhouse. So, from my desk right here, I can transport myself into, a greenhouse in Japan. I can go to a greenhouse in Italy, Czech Republic, and really be able to get, an up close view of the issues that are happening in the crop. But when it comes to IPM, a massive component of this is record keeping. And most of this comes down to pen and paper record keeping. But the challenge with that is it's really time consuming. It's a tedious process, and you're not actually using the information in real time to make real decisions. So what we do is we take this vast quantity of information that's coming out of the greenhouse. So when we do, scout training programs for helping people to identify whiteflies, how do you assign a pressure scale for spider mites, 1 to 5? And essentially we take all of that data, we process it, and then we apply some fancy analytics to it. And essentially what we do is we create what we call an IPM forecast. And this tells people where the pest and disease is likely to spread over the next week. And so that's really kind of where the data science behind the work that we do is taking place. And then what we do is essentially pinpoint the exact locations in the greenhouse where you need to be making either changes to your management program. So you may put out, what Dr. Mirza called a spot spray. You may double up the amount of biologicals in a certain area that you're putting out. And the reasoning for this is, when it comes to IPM, you want to withhold, any amount of money that you put out for, as long as possible until there's, without risking any economic damage. And so what we allow people to do is really kind of tighten up their screws. And, some of the customers we work with, I would say are, some of the most advanced IPM programs, in greenhouses in the world. And even then they were able to use this technology and cut down on their pesticide use by 70%. And a 70% reduction is pretty well, that's extremely challenging to be able to achieve that. And they were and it all comes down to how can we use this technology and to better enhance our decision making. And then we work with customers directly on a weekly basis to really kind of point them, hey, this is a problem. You need to pay attention to this. We don't do the decision making for them, but what we do.
Yeah, this is where I wanted to go, because I've got a diagram that I use to explain digital and human interaction in agriculture. I believe that digital technology can tell us where there's a problem, maybe what the problem is, but why is it there and how to fix it? That remains and will remain the realm of the human being for a foreseeable future. Michael, this is something that you did. You went into greenhouses and you scouted greenhouses. How do you see yourself as a veteran in the industry? Do you view Ecoation as friend or foe? Do you view it as a threat or a compliment? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, one thing I'd like to add about IPM in general in Canada is we're not getting any new chemical products, at least not very fast. We have a high regulatory process for getting chemicals into this country in closed environments. And part of that has to do with the extra testing that needs to be done for worker safety and that sort of thing. We don't base, at least as of yet, we don't base our regulatory process off the US, which can even fast track chemicals that are less harmful to humans into their programs. We do it in a small way, but it takes years and years. So we need things like biological control on a daily basis because we don't, in fact, we not only are not getting new chemicals, the ones that we have are getting taken away from us. So what generally that leads to is an overuse of a small amount of chemical families, and which also leads to resistance in insects. So it's an ongoing thing. Moving forward, we have to go to biocontrol and enhance it. Now, to get back to your question, at first, of course, I'm technically not that. I'm not that good at technical things. I'm from another era, but so when software first came out for scouting, the first thought is, of course, is it taking away my job? Yeah. It automatically creeps into your mind, no matter what. So what I did to counteract that was I actually consulted to some of the early software programs out there. They hunted me down, and so I was able to, they had questions about. Just give an example. We have a number of thrips species thrips worldwide is the number one pest in cropping systems indoors. Traditionally, we've had Western flower thrips, which has been the number one. In Canada, it's totally resistant to all of our sprays. So you need biological control. You need predatory mites. You need things like Aureus and things to attack it. So, but when and we're a bit regional on this. When we started going to biocontrol programs and cutting down on sprays, another species called onion thrips has come up. It's one of our native thrips. It's always been around, but when you sprayed, it knocked it out. So it was never a problem in the crop. Now it has become a problem. And one of the problems is the predatory mites, at least the ones that we use now, don't go after it the same way as they would Western flower thrips. So in a program like Gavin's, you can't just say, you have thrips in this area. You have to know what species it is. And it's very hard to do visually without a scope. So these are things that you still need that human element for. And once I was able to determine that, I relaxed a bit. And I do see it. I do see, my son uses Chat GPT for things. He's a coder, and he's learned how to use it to help him do his coding. And by asking it questions, and he knows what questions to ask it. So, I'm coming over to that side, and it's slowly. So I think it's got great future. It does have limitations, but banding together is the way to go. It always is.
Your value, or Dr. Mirza's value, is not in walking the greenhouse and trying to get the data. Your value is actually in figuring out what to do once you achieve the data or once you receive it. Dr. Mirza, we're always going to run out of time on these things. I want to talk about the constraints with respect to people in the industry, but Dr. Mirza, I'm going to do it right now because I think we're going to run out of time. I wanted to ask you a little question around cycling technology. I visited your facility in Olds where you were cycling aquaculture with hydroponics, and you should touch on the fact that most of the work that you do these days is hydroponics. And then talk a little bit about cycling with the tilapia, the fish, and how the fish was cycled into indoor farming. And then we'll go back to technology and people here.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. This brings to a point that in an indoor situation, we are not using soil essentially for growing media. So we are using the way our technology has come. We are growing above ground crops, so they're not touching the ground, and nutrients are recycled. In aquaculture, the specific example you gave where we use the fish waste and then goes into the roots of the plants, and then so fish waste nutrients are used by the plants and then recycled back to the fish as well. So this is called aquaculture, one method of growing. Then we have got hydroponic method. Most of the indoor farming right now or vertical farm are on a water-based culture. Hydroponic is a definition which is very exciting. This is in the media as well. Hydroponic is basically the soil-less cultivation system. And the nutrients are most of the time are recycled. And this is one of the big advantages of an indoor farm or in the greenhouse as well, where you have the ability to recycle your nutrient, because we are going into an era now of high technology where carbon footprint is going to be very important, carbon sequester is going to be important, and we got to remember that when we grow plants, they do fix carbon dioxide. In many cases, we have to, so basically the recycle of carbon dioxide as well. We absorb the CO2 from the air. In many cases, we have to add extra carbon dioxide to them for higher productivity, because in a greenhouse, we got to have much higher production than we could get outdoor. So recycling of nutrients is important. Recycling in the fish waste, aquaculture is important as well. So there are many aspects that in it, essentially, we recycle nutrient in a greenhouse situation. So aquaculture is quite getting quite a bit of attention, with your protein source as well. But I always caution people that if you are going to grow fish as well, if you are going to grow plants as well, you have two marketing strategy. So using fish alone for getting fertilizer is not going to be enough to invest too heavily into aquaculture. But in a greenhouse situation, recycling of nutrient is very common now. We practice it, and then your plants are composted as well. So we have to look at this approach of greenhouse farming in the total picture. We have a pretty good idea on the technology, but Gavin is offering artificial intelligence. When Michael was talking about thrips, I was thinking that there's one company I deal with now. I won't name them at this time, but where plant signals are getting more important. You attach a gadget to them, and if a thrip says written on one leaf, a signal goes. How to interpret those signals is artificial intelligence is not going to be able to do that. We still need people looking at the screen, because we have already been able to identify plant stress, for example. If there's a water stress, is there a nutrient stress, is there an insect stress? Can we identify, is it a thrip, is it a whitefly? And there are specific signals. So I'm pretty excited, although my hairs are turning brown after I dyed them. But remember that a lot of wisdom is coming along in these new technologies, and automation is an essential part, like Gavin was saying, that without automation. And I work on many projects where people are studying robots. Now robots are getting quite common, picking robots, planting robots, seeding robots. So the role of robots will be far higher now as the labor becomes more picky as well, and not want to work, and the wages and everything. I guess I just saw a report today where cucumber leaves are being picked up and hauled with the robot. They just did it. So robotics will be playing a very big role in large farming as well. On smaller farming, I deal with a lot of them where we still have to use labor, but understanding that what new technologies are coming will be very important.
Well, I think that segues into our last 8 minutes here, and very nicely. And that is, well, picking up on what you just talked about, that's fascinating. IoT, Internet of Things, basically putting sensors on plants themselves, using technology like Ecoation, basically bringing more information in. Michael, as you stare into the future and the constraints that might be hitting the indoor farming world, one of them, I think, is talented people. What could you say to young people who are considering a career in this type of agriculture?
Yeah, well, I have the advantage of being a community college instructor as well, so I'm able to see that up front, and just having the conversations with them. I just strictly stick with insects and what I teach, but a lot of them have. I think it is up to the instructors or the consultants or that to get people interested in things. And I've had students approach me and say, and they're a year away from, or a semester and a half from coming out into the workforce. I've had them say, I was never interested in insects before, and now I am, and I want to know more, and it's pretty fascinating stuff when you dig down into it. So I think it's that passion. I think if you find just that little inkling of passion in some sort of part of the sector, then go with it. I think it's also important for growers to recognize what kind of skills people have coming in, so they aren't stuck on, a potting line forever. People lose interest in that. And I've been on a potting line when I was younger. It's it's fast paced and it's repetitive, and you don't want to stay there for the rest of your career. So recognizing what those skills are, for one thing. The biggest problem, of course, is quantity. as things progress, as growers expand, they need more people, and you know, handing it off to companies like Ecoation, things to enhance that lack of bodies, I think is the way to go.
So I think that one of the things I've been talking about in the last books I've written, the one I'm going to write again, is the farm technology integrator, the role of a technology integrator. Gavin, you can speak to this. How? And then we'll wrap up with Dr. Mirza. You can talk a little bit about the reason that you're on AGvisorPRO and how people can connect with you. But Gavin, from a standpoint of career opportunities for young people looking to get into indoor farming technology, can you speak to a little bit about the opportunities and how excited you might be?
Yeah, you know, for myself, I've had wonderful opportunities to, you know, grow my career in the horticulture space and really kind of working with, you know, a number of kind of ag tech companies here in the BC area. And I've been fortunate that, you know, I've been able to pull other young people that weren't otherwise interested in this space into this industry, or, you know, other people that may have grown up with a traditional agricultural background, you know, family farming, and they're going, okay, what other opportunities are there, you know, where I can still contribute to food supply? And you know, most people that are involved in agriculture have a rooted passion to be part of this space. And so, you know, with Ecoation, what I find particularly amazing is we have a team of 40 engineers who could be working at LinkedIn, Amazon, you know, any of these large tech companies, and they choose to be here because they want to help people. And the mission that we have is, you know, to really help people grow food. And these are people that, you know, are probably several generations away from any type of agricultural background, but they're bringing in amazing skill sets, completely diverse points of view, and to be able to apply these to some of the most difficult challenges that we are facing in agriculture. And what I can, you know, really kind of encourage people when they want to jump into this space is to, you know, just take that leap, you know, and to, you know, see the light, you know, and because the opportunities are there. You know, there are companies that want to employ this top talent, particularly, you know, in the science and engineering side of things, you know, and I see that people are willing to make pretty dramatic career changes, you know, and on one of our team members, he comes from a background in neuroscience. He does a PhD in neuroscience and decides, you know what, I'm actually going to go into this space instead. And so I can see that, you know, the opportunities are there, and if people are willing to take them, you know, the financial incentives are there right now.
Well, I know that at AGvisorPRO, we are on a mission to connect people better. Our chief product officer came from the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. So Brock has got a background in data science, and he wasn't going to work in agriculture, but now he's caught the bug, and we're doing noble things. Dr. Mirza, you're involved with AGvisorPRO on our community, our horticulture and indoor farming community. Can you talk a little bit about why did you do it, and a little bit about how you can help people?
I think basically I like the people, I guess. Robert, I introduced later on, but Wilson was there, Brock was there, and one of my good friend, Norm Jensen, convinced me, hey, it's a good platform for information, especially asking questions. I love diagnostics and recommending, so that appealed me a lot, that it's AGvisorPRO. And knowledge management, you know, I'm a big one for the future. Knowledge has to be managed and provided to people. So that's why I love or like AGvisorPRO, all the approaches. And when Wilson calls me up and, hey, what's going on? That's more like a personalized rather than a far away, just a app. So I think that's what I like most, that in this way I could answer a question in a more friendly way than just more technical.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your involvement. Michael, one of the first questions I posted was about an insect, and you were one of the first people to respond on it. So you've been on AGvisorPRO for a while, and now, Michael, why did you choose to come on the platform?
Same as some of the same reasons Dr. Mirza stated. I do like being in touch with people. I do like being able to help people. If I didn't like that, then I wouldn't be a consultant. So the interaction is important to me, and I have a background, so if I can help, I don't like bookkeeping, but I hire an accountant, right? So, so I ask them questions. So that's the main reason.
And Gavin, from your standpoint, representing a company, a technology company on AGvisorPRO, what is it that attracts you guys to the platform? What do you see as potential with AGvisorPRO?
So I think kind of our relationship started a couple of years ago. Kind of during the height of the pandemic there, and we were able to kind of link up the AGvisorPRO directly into our platform, because we're a technology provider. We're not consultants. We're not, providing specific advice about what to do. But, we were able to put that into the platform. And what I see is really kind of a key benefit to what AGvisorPRO is bringing here is this access to information is the most challenging part in controlled environment agriculture right now. And, we have clients all over the world, and I'd love for them to be able to, look at the data, try to, make sense of it, but then call up Michael, call up Dr. Mirza and say, look at what my map is showing, look at what these graphs are doing, look at this picture of this plant directly right here, look at the climate that's all part of it, help me understand what I should do. And, based off of, that wisdom that they've accumulated, help me, make sense of all this information and to make the best outcome for the crop. And I think, that's what I see as, the real potential of this community that AGvisorPRO is building here, is the opportunity to connect people in greenhouses that are, far away, that maybe don't have access to the same kind of talent pool that we have.
Well, speaking of greenhouses, Dr. Mirza, I have a little hobby greenhouse. It's a soil greenhouse just outside Sylvan Lake, and I'm going to reach you on AGvisorPRO. I'm going to switch on the connection, and you're going to do some coaching for me, and I'll even pay you for your advice so that the stuff grows. So that's great. With all of that being said, everybody, I want to thank you guys, Michael and Gavin, Dr. Mirza, for being on our AGvisorPOD. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion on indoor farming and you learned a lot about controlled environmental agriculture. I know every time we do these, we're just excited about featuring the people that you can connect with on AGvisorPRO. This AGvisorPOD is available also in short format, so keep an eye open for our monthly long formats as well as the short formats on AGvisorPOD. Thanks for joining us.